Hi everyone, welcome to another Community Tech Talk with Wallaroo.ai. Today we're going to go through platform deployment with Helm charts, and so my colleague John Hanserick, he will take you through some of the details on that, how to use Helm to install products like Wallaroo. So we'll use Wallaroo as an example, and also how to customize your Helm installation and update that in configuration, and also some things to be aware of, the gotchas, when installing with Helm. And so it's important that this when you are going to your ML production, and this is one of the methods that you can use to help streamline that process and operationalize your ML models into production and kick that off. On the last call 2 weeks ago, our last Tech Talk, we had someone who said, "What do you guys do?" So I think it's something we naturally assumed, but I guess it's right that we sort of just set the stage on who we are. And so essentially, Wallaroo.ai, we are a Series A startup, and we are across, we're all distributed across the US and Canada, and some places in Europe as well. We're sponsored by, funded by M12, the Microsoft startup funding group. And essentially our product runs your ML models into production. So we take those experimentation, that development and that ideation, and we get that into production. And that can be a long process for a lot of companies. And according to Gartner, about 80% of those projects fail to make it into production, just because, as you can see here, the myriad of different tools that are available to these processes. And so that's where we come in. We are that go-to for production ML, to not only get your models into production, but also make sure that they are performing the way they're supposed to, with model validation, observability, and that capability to keep them running and optimized as well. And so that's essentially who we are. We run on all the three major clouds: Azure, AWS, and GCP. And for the Enterprise Edition, we run on premises as well. We have a community edition, which you can download for free, and I'll share the link later on. Actually, I'll share it right now. So you can actually download the community edition. It's free. The license doesn't expire. And we have a whole ton of tutorials, which my colleague John creates for us. And you can actually get through those tutorials and get some hands-on practice to operationalize your ML models in different scenarios. And so that's essentially who we are. My name is Martin Bald, by the way, so I'm the community manager at Wallaroo, and it's my job to help engage with the data scientists, ML engineers, and anyone other roles in the MLOps space. And I love to hear from you and hear what you're doing as well. So I'd love to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can ping me at your leisure. And if you do download the community edition, which I encourage you to, you also get access to our Slack community, and you can access me from there. And I can then be that conduit into a whole host of smart people that are inside the company. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, John, now, and John will take us through the rest of this session. John?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ball. All right, so today we're going over how to use Helm for Kubernetes service installation. So we'll be using Wallaroo as the example, but this works with anyone else. So you can see my screen here. This is the Wallaroo documentation site. So I'm going to run over how to do this, how to install Wallaroo using Helm, which you could use COTS. You can just use straight Kubernetes if you're like an insane person. But the whole point of Helm and COTS is to make it easier to deploy things into your Kubernetes environment. So what we're going to do here is run through. Now, in our case, there's a few, I forgot I turned that off, so that's okay. Get to the official doc side. Sorry, I was running off of a test build there to show some things off. So let me get into here real quick. All right, cool. So there's a few prerequisites for installing, in this case, Wallaroo, but this could be anywhere else. What we're going to focus on is there's a couple things you usually will need with Helm. So of course, obviously you need kubectl. That's what we're going to be using for various Kubernetes commands such as creating namespace, showing off pods and the like. Helm itself, and you can install that on various platforms. And I put a link here to those instructions for whether you're using Windows, Mac OS, Linux, or the like. We also use Crew, and this is a plugin for Kubernetes. We can use other things. This case, mainly pre-flight and support bundle. Now, I'm not going to go into installing the Crew items or even installing Helm. You can find those elsewhere. I'm just going to focus on our process. So something to be aware of with Helm is that Helm will give you all sorts of different values. Usually these are stored in YAML files. In this case, these are all the things, the image registry, where it's getting its images from. In this case, we have generate secrets, for information, CPU limits, all these things. So this is a whole laundry list of all the containers and their settings and, the number of requests, the limits about memory and the like. The great part is that by using a registry services we can bypass all of this. These are all going to be applied by default, but we can override those locally. So let me get to the first part, which is for selling, depending on the item you're trying to install in Helm, there usually will be some sort of registry service. And this is where it's going to grab the various containers that it's rolling out, get the settings and the like. So let me go to a terminal shell. There we go. Now, I've already got my password stored because I don't want you guys to see it, but I'm going to go ahead and do a quick registry login. So I'm telling it, hey, I'm going here via replicated where it's got all those Helm values and the containers and the like. I'm giving it my username and then my password. This way, once it authenticates me, great, I can go on the next step. Now, what I can then do is do a pre-flight check. And let me pull this back up into here. Which was a previous step, as I recall. Yep. Let's say pre-flight, so I can just show that. So what the pre-flight verification does, and we're using a plugin for this, is it's going to verify that our environment is valid and works well for what we're trying to install. So we'll let that run in the background. So it's going to go through, check my resources. Do I have enough CPU? Do I have like container D installed? All that kind of thing. This is not a Helm specific item, but it's probably a good idea depending on what you're trying to install and what you're trying to do. So we ran through this. It checked to make sure that everything's good. My version of Kubernetes is okay. It's got the right kind of distribution and the like. So we're all set. We can go in and go to the next step. So what I'm going to be doing for my next trick is actually running through my process here. So we'll use kubectl, and I'm going to install, and again, in this case, Wallaroo is our example. Create a namespace for that. And I can also set that to be my default namespace. And the reason why I'd like to do that is that way all my future commands, I don't have to specify the namespace. It's just there, just to save me some time and headache in the future. So great. So I've got my default namespace of Wallaroo. Now, the case of, again, a Wallaroo install, depending on what you're doing. In this case, we have a browser component or a web server component that's being revealed to the public end. So we're going to need some certificates so we can validate that the server is accurate and correct. You don't want to go to a server and have it try to do man-in-the-middle attacks. So I'm going to be generating a kubectl secret, and I've already got my certificates and my private keys all set. So we have instructions in our DNS documentation about what you need for that and the like. But this is just a good example here. In my case, my certificates are stored in a subdirectory. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the kubectl secret, create secret. And I'm specifying, I'm going to use a TLS secret. I'm naming it my TLS secrets, original there. And then I tell it, hey, my certificates are living in the subdirectory. My private key is living in the subdirectory. And I'm good. All right, so now we're set. The next thing, in this case with a Helm install, is we're going to use a local values file. So I showed you a moment ago all of these various settings and the like, but a local file lets us override these. So I'm going to give it some specific things. I'm telling it, hey, this is my URL, doc release test. This is my suffix for that to be used later on. Here's my secret that's using for the certificate valuation. So I just created the my TLS secrets, kubectl secret, and that's going to be right here. I'm going to tell it, hey, generate passwords for my API client, my administrative users. They're randomly generated, so I want to see what those are unless I go in the background. And then I can enable some services. So I'm going to enable the API lib, so I can have my load balancer. I want a dashboard, and this is going to be the name it displays when people come up. And yeah, I want some authentication, so I want people when they come in there, they have to log in. This part is only if you use private model registries for, say, MLflow, containerized models and the like. I didn't put my tokens in there. I don't want you guys to see that be recorded, but you can certainly do that. And then other settings from there. And again, these are all documented on the Wallaroo documentation site, but depending on what you're installing, this is where you're going to tell Helm, hey, whatever those default values are, here's what I'm going to override you with. All right, so we've already done that. So we've got our file set and everything is good. So now we're actually going to install. Now, again, in our case, we're going with Wallaroo just as an example. But when we do it, we're going to specify a few things. I'm going to specify the release. I'm going to specify the registry URL it's coming from. And inside of that is going to be the release version. I'm going to specify the version I'm installing and then tell it, hey, don't forget, override things with the local values file. So an example of that, if I was installing, say, the enterprise version of Wallaroo, I would specify, hey, here's my OCI, EE version. Here's the version I would install and my local values file. Now, in my case, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm actually installing a preview build that should work just fine. It was called UAT, and we'll set that up. So we can get that going there. So we're going to do a Helm install. Let me just get in the end here. So again, I'm installing Wallaroo. This is where I'm getting it from. So let me go back here real quick and replace some of these values. So I'm telling it I want to go to the UAT channel. I'm going to change this version right here to be 3085, which I just pulled out as the latest test version for me. And then my locals value file. In that case, that was an example, so good. Great. So we know we're going to use this file, what version we're installing, where we're getting it in, and now we go for it. And it'll sit there in the background. Now, this may take a few minutes, so forgive me if I vamp a little bit. What it's doing right now is it's reaching out to that registry service. It's pulling down these particular parameters, these values that it's now loading in the background. And it's also grabbing the various containers, the Wallaroo containers, Plateau, all the things that are within this environment. So this is your advantage of using Helm. So instead of me having to go and say, I'm going to put this service in my Kubernetes environment. Oh, now I need to do this. It's all defined in this one file, and then you can override it, and you can distribute that file to other people and then let them override it with their own values. So we're chugging along here. Good. Was able to find the right channel and the right version. So we're doing great on that. All right. So now it's installing. It's not done just yet. And I can do a test, which I'll do right now. I know it's going to install. I know it's going to fail, but that's okay because it's not finished. But at least kind of show an example of what's going on in the background. Okay. So it's like, hey, I'm doing my test. Some things are not ready. Just as a little trick I like to use, I can watch the pods come up. So we know our namespace is Wallaroo. So I'm going to tell it, hey, let me move this up a little bit. kubectl, get me the pods that are in Wallaroo, and I'm going to use this watch command. So that way every 2 seconds it refreshes. Great. So it shows me, all right, the API is up. The dashboard is up. It looks like Keycloak is still coming up. GraphQL will usually start and fail a few times as things are coming up. So this does not bother me. But so I expect this, the GraphQL to be running and then stop and then start again as things come up. Keycloak is usually the longest one in this process, but that helps me out. So once everything is running, we'll know that the installation is ready, and then I'll do another Helm test, and then we should see success from there. And then we'll do a couple extra things in the meantime. So we'll let this finish up. Again, GraphQL, I anticipate that failing. This depending on what you're trying to do and how long it takes, it can always take a few minutes for things to come up. So what I'll do, just to save some time later on, is while we're waiting, as I mentioned before, this is going to have a browser-based component to this. So I want to be able to reach that. So this is something that's in our Wallaroo DNS documentation, if you ever want to refer to that. These are just some little tricks that I use. Get services. I'm going to take a look at the services, and there we go. That's going to be the IP address for my services. So I'm going to go ahead and set my DNS up now so I don't have to do it later. So I'm going to save the services for the load balancer. I'm going to store this value into this variable called load balancer. Great. Now, in my case, we're using GCP as our DNS provider. So I'm going to give this command real quick that tells it, hey, update this particular URL, my doc release test, with this new IP address. That way, as that's going through, that'll help me out. So great. Now, if I do a host command, I can verify that's good. So let's go back and see how our pods are doing. Okay, mostly done there. Looks like we've got one last crash loop on there. But again, now that Keycloak is running, that's going to resolve itself. So I'll go ahead and stop there. And by the time we run our test, we should be good. So let's run our Helm test again. So this is going through the test case is something that is defined by the user. So you can check that out on the Helm documentation. But all right, there we go. This doesn't surprise me too much, but we're 2 out of the 3 tests. So the first one succeeded, the second one failed. Again, I'm not surprised because it's still coming up. Okay, now everything is running, so I think we're going to be okay. Let's go ahead and do one last test. And hopefully a live demo isn't going to make me look silly here, Martin, if this fails. But at least if there is a failure, we can then start seeing, all right, what's going on, what's wrong. But I'm pretty confident it's going to finish up and everything's going to succeed since I saw all my pods running.
It fails, Jonas. Detention.
Oh, man. Okay, great. You can see everything has succeeded and I could go ahead and get in. Now, let's test that real quick. Now, this may or may not actually be ready because, DNS is propagating. So let's see. It might be there. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's my URL. I can sign in. Now, at this point, for the case of Wallaroo, I'd have to set up users and there's other background, things I'd have to do on that. But I think this at least shows some examples about how to get to a Helm installation. Martin, I think you mentioned earlier that you wanted to show how to do like some upgrades or changes.
Yeah, I did.
All right. Do we have time for that?
We do.
Okay. Well, then let me show. You can see I've set a name, Hendrik House of Helm. Those who play D&D might be giggling right now because you know that Helm is a thing in that. But let's change that name. So we're going to change this to Hendrik, I don't know, Pancake Shop. Just why not? So if we want to change this in Helm, I can go back and I can say, okay, I want to now update my installation. Maybe you have some new pods, you have a new version to install, or you just want to change the settings. Well, in our case, we've just overwritten this local file with new values. So this time, we'll do this similar thing, but instead of a Helm install, we'll do a Helm upgrade. So it tells it, hey, you don't have to go pulling all the containers and all the rest. I just want you to check for changes between what was and what is now and roll with that. So we'll go like that. Okay. So it's like, great. I'm taking a look at these Helm values. I'm taking a look at your local config. I'm seeing what is there that's different and getting in there. And this should be a faster process than before. I think I had an extra tab open. Yeah, so I can, and just for the heck of it, we can go back to watching those pods doing their thing. So we're like, okay, now as you notice, dashboard, it was rerunning it. So basically what it did is it shut down the previous dashboard service, left everything else running because all that really changed was the dashboard. Started up a new pod, deleted the old one. So I think we may be ready. Let me see. Oh, there it is right there. I didn't even have to refresh. Hendrik Pancake Shop. So, just a simple version of changing values, but I could have changed, say, this private model registry. I could have turned modeled insights on and off if I wanted some resources, all sorts of things. I didn't have to reinstall the world, or maybe the certificates changes. Okay, I can generate a new kubectl secret and then point it to the new spot, keep the old for whatever reason, and then just keep on going again. So, Martin, I think that unless there's any other cool tips and tricks that I don't have up my sleeve right now, but if there's anything else you want to go into real quick, let me know. But I think I've shown installation changes and upgrades, and even threw in some DNS magic on the side. So,
and the gotchas.
I think the main gotchas is John's. I call it John's law, and it's something. It's always the small and stupid things that'll get you. Yeah. So, for example, as this being a YAML file, if I had, say, this stuff sitting over here instead of over there, it would really get mad at us. So just be aware of, making sure that your comma's in the right place, your colon's in the right place. It's always going to be those small and little things that'll get you in the end. And the last thing is, of course, check your prerequisites. There's a reason why we had the pre-flight checks. And if you don't want to run pre-flight, if you're confident enough, that's on you. But I highly recommend the first time you install anything via Helm or COTS or anything, check the pre-flights if they're available, make sure that they pass okay. It just gives you that one last peace of mind. And then, of course, the last thing is that depending on what you've got going on, we also have a support bundle that we use. So if something had gone wrong, I could generate those support files. And I think I've even got, yeah, there we go. So this is something that can plug in with some values in there, and that basically lets you say, grab all the log files, tar them up, and then submit them to whatever support or technical support person that you need help from. But that's something else to look into. Now, I guess the last thing is uninstalling. If I wanted to uninstall, and I don't, why would I? Wallaroo is awesome. But I do that just with a Helm uninstall command. And since I did Helm install Wallaroo, of course, it'll be Helm uninstall Wallaroo. And then I could do some additional cleanup, removing the namespaces and the like, which will get rid of all the secrets. But this uninstall removes the services and pods and then all the like. And I do have on there, if you want to make sure that everything's gone, I can delete the namespace where I'd store things. So I think those are the real catches, is just make sure your pre-flight checks are done just in case. Make sure that all your settings in the right way, that they're format they're supposed to be. And then if something does go wrong, if your whatever your COTS install supports it, get a support bundle, then you can kind of analyze, maybe something's missing, maybe it's a wrong version of something. But that's certainly an option. So that is my brief demonstration about how to install a service or application like using Helm in your Kubernetes environment. So I hope it's helpful for those who are looking for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. If you want to share back the screen to me, I
would. You have it, sir.
All right.
You have the con.
Is it the con? You have the con. So, yeah. Everybody that read Lord of the Flies in high school. So, here we go.
Oh, yeah. No, the conch. It took me a second. I was making like a Star Trek reference, and you went, classic refined stuff. So I think we know who the two of us, who drinks the beer and who drinks the wine.
I don't drink anything. But yeah, no, thanks, John. I really appreciate it. That was great to go deep in and help people see that when you get into ML production, as I showed from that, myriad of tools there, that with Wallaroo, you get the opportunity there to quickly get those models into production, optimize them, observe them, and also with different scenarios and different clusters that you're managing, whether it be LLMs, computer vision, batch or streaming, then you have the capability there to manage that whole setup and environment easily, to make sure that that operationalization process is running, and it's seamless and efficient as well. So as I talked about at the beginning, you can actually go download this. There we go. So you can actually go download the community edition. We don't, add you to the sales contact list. So yeah, just register, sign up. You can get the what's it, the license, and as I said before, it doesn't expire, and then you can go through a whole bunch of those great tutorials that John had up on his screen there on our docs.wallaroo.ai site. So with that, thank you very much again for joining us today, and we'll have another deep tech session next week, not next week, 2 weeks, so on the 17th. So please join us there, and check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, because we do post these onto that channel, and we have other content that we post there regularly as well. Thank you again, take care, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
We're still recording.